Hey everyone. Have you ever wondered how the entire world gets together to try and solve a massive problem like climate change? Well, they actually have this huge meeting every single year. Today, we're going to break down what this year's big one, called COP30, is all about. Let's dive in. It's a pretty big question, right? I mean, sometimes it feels impossible just to get a few friends to agree on what movie to watch, let alone getting the whole world to agree on how to save the planet. But there is a plan, and it all revolves around this thing called a COP. So, what on earth is a COP? Well, it stands for Conference of the Parties. But honestly, the easiest way to get it is to think of it like a giant yearly group project for planet Earth. Leaders from almost 200 countries all get in a room to try and make a game plan for fighting climate change. And this year's meeting is the 30th one, which is exactly why they call it COP30. Now, the location is super important too. It's being held in Belém, Brazil, which is right next to the Amazon rainforests, the lungs of our planet. The crazy heat they're experiencing there is a real-life reminder of why these talks are so urgent. Okay, so every year, the conference has a main theme. For COP30, the big focus, the main event, is something called adaptation. So what does that actually mean? For a long time, the main conversation was about mitigation. That's all about trying to stop the storm from getting worse, by cutting down pollution. But now there's a big realization that the storm is kinda already here. So the focus is shifting to adaptation, which is all about preparing for the impacts. Things like building stronger seawalls or having solid plans for those insane heat waves. And listen, this is not some problem for the future. It's happening right now. Adalberto Maluf from Brazil talked about how his city, Rio de Janeiro, had days where the temperature felt like it was over 50 degrees Celsius. Can you imagine that? He said it's just impossible to live with. It just goes to show how badly we need to start adapting to these new extremes. So you think, okay, everyone agrees that adaptation is super important. What's the problem? Well, just like in any huge group project, there's a pretty big disagreement. And it all boils down to two simple-sounding but actually very tricky issues: measurement and money. How do we actually track our progress, and who's going to pay for all this stuff? Let's look at the measurement problem first. So a bunch of experts came up with this list of 100 indicators. Think of it like a global report card for climate change. It helps each country see where they're doing okay and, more importantly, where they need to improve. The problem? Not everyone can agree on when or even how to start using this report card. And that brings us to the second and maybe even tougher part of the argument: money. We're talking about a lot of money. To make all these changes, developing countries are saying they need at least 120 billion US dollars every single year. And this is where it gets really sticky. Developing countries are basically saying, look, we need help to protect our people, but we need it as grants, like a gift. We can't take on more loans that will just bury us in debt. But on the other side, developed countries are still arguing about how much they should give and when. It's a massive roadblock. Okay, so that's the giant global picture, but let's bring it right back home. What does any of this actually mean for us, right here in Singapore? This quote from Minister Grace Fu really hits hard. As a small island that's really low-lying, Singapore is literally on the front lines of this battle. Rising sea levels aren't just something you read about in the news. For us, it's a direct threat to our homes, our lives. Adaptation isn't just a nice idea, it's about our survival. And the good news is, Singapore is not just waiting around. We are already taking action. You've probably seen some of the construction along our coast. Those are seawalls, and the government is already making plans for extreme heat and floods. Singapore is even planning to use that global report card we talked about to make our own national plan even better. And here's why this has to be a team effort. Think about it. A huge flood in another country could mess up the supply of food that ends up on our plates here. Or as the world gets warmer, mosquitoes that carry diseases like dengue can travel to new places. These problems don't care about borders, so our solutions can't either. So with all these big arguments and the stakes so high, what happens next? Where do we go from here? At the end of the day, the goal at COP30 is to get a deal on adaptation that all 200-ish countries can sign. But like we've seen, getting everyone to agree on the tiny details of measurement and money is really difficult. It's going to take a whole lot of talking to get everyone on the same page. Which leaves us all with a pretty big question. We know what we need to do. We can see places like Singapore are already getting to work. But with teamwork on a global scale being so tricky, how will we all come together to protect our future home? It's something for all of us to think about. Thanks for joining me today.